I'm joined now in the studio by the comedian and writer Rhona Cameron, the writer Tariq Ali, the journalist Peter Oborne, who is an associate editor of The Spectator, and Annunziata Rees-Mogg, who stood in both the 2005 and 2010 general elections as a Conservative parliamentary candidate. Rhona, are we all getting a bit carried away here, or do you think we are seeing a genuine withdrawal from the centre ground of politics, a repolarisation, if you like, of the battleground?
Yes, you know, common sense, things looking up are expression as I would identify with right now. I mean, like many people on the left, I sort of felt like it was time to just give up hope after the election. But we're now seeing, hopefully, Labour move into the position they should be in, where we have great promise with Jeremy Corbyn perhaps at the helm. So I think that this neoliberal, you know, bollocks that we've been living through has only got us into this self-perpetuating cycle of, you know, of inequality and unfairness, with filthy rich not taking enough responsibility for paying taxes and people languishing on benefits. You know, you can have a compassionate society that respects business but still respects good public services. We all know it's been going wrong since the Thatcher era. That was perpetuated by New Labour, and at last Labour could be moving in the right direction with Jeremy Corbyn.
Ed Miliband was widely believed to have moved in that direction, and the electorate sent him packing.
Well, I think that we were so desperate, obviously, to have Labour in, that we perhaps kidded ourselves on that situation was a little bit more left-wing than it was. I feel this is time. You know, we're living in catastrophic times. If you're a baby boomer, you bought houses at the right time. You know, if you're a wealthy person, you know, if you've got a couple of properties, you know, you can't understand how tragic and desperate this situation is. There are millions of people living in poverty, with the highest working poor since the 1890s.
This is a bleak picture, Peter Oborne.
It's time to change it, seriously, from the heart.
Bleak picture, and one which, I mean, traditionally, historically, the Labour Party would be the place you'd go to address it. Is it moving to the left? Do you see a shift from the centre ground, but first for the Labour Party, but also for both parties?
I think, you talk about British politics in general, what we're seeing is the triumph of neoliberalism. The Labour Party leadership candidates, the three main candidates, are trying to be as much like David Cameron as possible. It's an extraordinary thing.
When you say the three main candidates, the three in second, third and fourth place,
indeed,
according to the most
three
recent poll.
establishment candidates.
Yeah.
And so you do have a very interesting thing that the two main parties, the Conservatives and Labour, have merged to form a neoliberal consensus at the centre of British public life. And so Corbyn is a wonderful figure in that respect, because he's a revolution. I know you've become very respectable, Tariq Ali, and you wouldn't have approved of that sort of thing, but he's a revolution against
and that's what Corbyn represents.
Neoliberal conglomeration, which has captured. They really might as well. I do think they might as well merge, actually, the Osborne's Conservatives and the kind of centre-right of the Labour Party.
Which is what makes Corbyn's candidacy so interesting. Tariq Ali, perhaps not full-scale revolution, possibly a sort of velvet or a felt one on the cards. It's been a long time coming.
Well, we don't know whether it's theirs yet. I mean, what we do have, and what we have had for some time in this country since Margaret Thatcher's ascendancy, which Labour embraced wholeheartedly, is what I describe as an extreme centre. Wars abroad, wars on the poor at home, surveillance, attacks on civil rights, etc. And Peter is absolutely right that the three establishment candidates are so appalling that Jeremy appears like a ray of light from a dark sky.
If they had a messiah figure, if they had somebody possessed of charisma and a little bit of stardust, policies would become less important once again, and that could galvanise both the party and the electorate.
Well, Clement Attlee wasn't a very charismatic figure, and Jeremy Corbyn is a bit more charismatic than Attlee in some of the speeches he's been giving, but it's the policies which he's proposing for which there is majority support. Renationalisation of the railways, taking back the utilities into public ownership, 80%, 70%, 60% support. It's just that the neoliberal centre is totally opposed to
Rejoicing.
politics.
Attlee, of course, hang on, I want to hear from Annunziata as well.
Yeah.
Attlee, of course, became Prime Minister before the television age, so that my question about Stardust spoke a little more about image or style over substance. But to go back to the substantive points here, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, the centre ground, everybody wanted to be there up until, well, pretty much last week or last month. Now it would seem nobody does.
I think that the centre ground is what wins elections. And we have had a great focus for decades on winning the centre ground in order to win elections and giving up the more extreme ideologies, both of the Conservative Party. With the rise of UKIP, we've seen their right felt let down.
Doesn't suit the working poor.
And with the Labour Party, and excuse me, and with the Labour Party, with the rise of Corbyn, and the SNP on the left wing of that debate. And I think that abandoning the two extremes has been actually quite dangerous, but that we're in a great opportunity at the moment to reignite the debate and the ideological basis of both parties.
We're all, well, you're all talking in quite portentous terms. So we've heard, you know, redrawing of ideologies. We've heard the word revolution. How do we know, Rhona Cameron, this isn't just a post-defeat spasm, that the Labour Party isn't just embarking upon a little bit of soul-searching, but by the end of next month it'll be business as usual?
Well, indeed, the Labour Party is quite rightly engaging in some soul-searching, and so it had to. A couple of important points. What is at the heart of this matter? This obsession with this Tory-like centrist situation. What clearly happened in this country, OK, we've changed as a world, you know, it's a more global world, but the Americanization of our culture and the lip service that we've paid to free market capitalism, the commodification of our culture, and the economics of consumerism is dehumanising people.
I'm going to have to remind you again, the Conservatives just won an overall majority in the House of Commons. You're reflecting your very passionately held position. It may not be the country's.
Well, I believe it is the majority. But no, this election was like a freak election, because we all know that the two parties that had the biggest influence in this election were the SNP and UKIP. Now, if you're going to talk about centrist policies, work a bit better, that's not what happened in Scotland. What happened in Scotland was kind of revolutionary. You know, it was a
Labour had abandoned their left wing in Scotland, and something went to fill the void. And it was the SNP.
More left wing than what was on offer, and that's what has to happen.
We
now,
had
people
two
need
elections.
A party with
we
a
had
heart.
two elections. In Scotland, the left won, and in England, the left lost. And how these two are going to be reconciled, we will see. As it is, the SNP in Parliament is acting as an opposition party and has improved the quality of debate in that assembly.
Massively.
There's no doubt about that.
I suggest there's something else going on here. My friend, Mr. Richard Heller, in the Yorkshire Post, wrote a remarkable piece looking back at the 1976 Labour election, which and you looked at the leadership candidates, Crosland, Benn, Foote, the winner Callaghan, Jenkins, I mean Healy, amazing figures, great figures. And here we have basically three or four entirely irrelevant, a couple of former minor cabinet. I mean, this Lynn Kendall, I mean, absurd, a former, basically a jumped-up political advisor. Now, what is interesting and significant.
So was David Cameron.
What is significant here and very interesting is the abandonment after 13 years of government of the Blairites. They're trying to engage, but in fact Miliband, David in the States, Milburn, he came in with an intervention, but he's out of politics, making a lot of money. Blair made an intervention. Traditionally he'd have been still involved. He's only 60. He makes an intervention, but he's out there making loads of money advising dictators. Basically,
Alan Johnson didn't fancy it. The Blunkett's out. It's fascinating that the abdication of everybody who was involved in that Blair government have just pulled out of politics, leaving it to these jumped-up political special advisors with no real experience. But to be fair, who populate both sides of the House, although you describe a peculiar problem for Labour at the moment.
No, but if you look at Labour in 76, you had people who had done major office, had served in major positions, and were fighting, and still fighting. And what you have here is the abdication of the Blairites. And they...
I just want to... Hang on, Tariq. I just want to hear from Annunziata on the question of, well, this might be sort of good or bad for Labour. Is it actually bad for democracy to have an opposition that is in apparent disarray, that will not, for all Tariq's admiration of the SNP, who's going to hold the government to account?
Absolutely. You need a strong opposition. There have been the Tories for Corbyn. I think it's a terrible idea, and I'm completely opposed to any Conservatives going along that route.
This is the notion that Conservatives will join, get a vote and try and bring in Corbyn because it makes Labour unelectable, they believe.
Absolutely, and I think what you genuinely want is a strong opposition, because that is how you get good government and you hold the government to account.
Tariq Ali, what does a strong opposition look like?
Well, a strong opposition looks like, for instance, the opposition that Labour was when Wilson was leader of the opposition and hammered the Tories every day on their policies. That is what an opposition looks like. He was the best leader of the opposition. These Labour people, you know, most of them, can't oppose the Tories because they agree with most of the things the Tories are doing.
They've even abdicated on a 50p tax.
Exactly.
They want to cut the taxes. It's amazing.
There is a more serious problem, James, and that is the following, that there's a democratic deficit, a huge one. The Greens get 1 million votes and 1 MP. UKIP gets 4 million votes and not a single MP. The two major parties, the extreme centre parties, which got 95% of the vote in the last general elections, this time got 75% of the vote with similar representation. So unless we have a big shift in proportional representation, something will happen. I mean, it happened in Scotland despite the lack of, despite the first past the post system. It will begin to happen here. People will learn how to vote properly.
The proportional representation conversation could detain us all night. Briefly, Rhona Cameron, what does a strong opposition look like for you? Because to have an opposition like Harold Wilson's, you need to have a politician like Harold Wilson.
Well, clear, defined policies, not just pandering to, reactive sort of politics. This man Jeremy Corbyn is no messiah. And let's forget all this.
Neither is he a very naughty boy, of course.
Well, let's forget the idea of this obsession with people being user-friendly celebrity figures. Let's forget all this sort of Americanization of our culture and concentrate on what's important. This has been a disastrous time for working people in this country. Labour are in disarray, and so they should be. It's not fair for Tony Blair to think after the damage he's done, however sexy he was, or how great it was in '97, and I was leaping with joy and wearing a red rose that night as well.
I wonder if
hang on, let me finish for just one second.
No, you say a disastrous time for working people in this country. Unemployment has fallen steadily throughout the life.
And food banks have raised. Food banks.
You are very contemptuous of the fact that people are in jobs. They have real jobs, and it has to be said, whoever's responsible, that those jobs have risen year after year in this government.
Well, I have a job to do now, and that is to call a conclusion to these. Rhona Cameron, thank you very much. Tariq Ali, Peter Oborne, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Many thanks.
Thank you.